that will be, it would be, anyway. Okay, so go ahead and kicking this thing off. I am Grizzly Gibbets reporting to you on the microphone here. And as you can see, we've got a little bit of Tabletop Simulator on the recording. This is going to be the grand finals of the Kickoff tournament for Season 3 of Ivion. We've got two powerful combatants present and playing. We've got Aldenwar, presently undefeated through the tournament, never had to disgrace himself among the losers bracket like myself, and we've also got Irate across the table from him. Um, Irate was actually the person who knocked me out of the losers bracket, and Aldenwar was who knocked me into the losers bracket. So I've had the pleasure of playing against both of these players thus far, and all games were fantastic up until this point too. So I believe, looking at what's going on here, that Aldenwar has selected his upper hand Barley Chew Ruffian deck as his initial deck of the two. As a reminder, each player has brought two decks into this tournament and has to win at least one game with both. So kind of a fun twist on the best 2 out of 3 format. Whereas over on the Irate side of the camp, we've got the Regenerate and Endurance Huntsman, just a big old tanky boy with 46 HP, recovering some of that through Regenerate over time. I am going to try and see if we can't turn to the side so we have a clear picture of everybody's hand. Excuse the was probably a little bit jarring um, turn there, but hopefully it's a little bit clearer for everybody. As we can kind of see now, this Aldenwar took the first turn. I think he just spent an action to generate Barley Chew and move 2 with initiative. He still only has 5 cards in hand, so and I think that over on our right side, he spent his initiative to move and has now played a charge to get right up next to Aldenwar and stun him, which has actually gotten an action. Which for anybody who's versed in Ivion in any real measurable sort of way, stunning getting an action is phenomenal. Um, so uh, I think now we're just waiting to see if there's any additional follow-up from Irate before passing the turn. We can, so as you can see, I can see both the hands of both players. I can see the hands of both players because I'm currently occupying the Game Master role, um, which is which allows me to see both, but they cannot see each other's hands. They can see each other's traits. These are face up for anybody who's not exceptionally well versed in playing Ivion or Ivion. I'm still not entirely sure how to pronounce it, but it looks like we just had a follow-up usage of Runic Slaughter, which is the ultimate trait for Irate, dealing 4 damage to the health total of 4 damage to the health total of Aldenwar, and also accruing a silence 2 of control. Aldenwar determines then, I think he played Regenerate from his feet zone, attaching to himself, and then obviously earning some duration, which will just be 3 counters that will tick down over time in order to provide a small boon. The real value of Regenerate is the fact that it is a -1/+2, so a really efficient resource conversion that hangs around in your feet zone. So it's just a really easy way to get power generation going on right from the jump, regardless of what the requirements of your deck actually are. And here, as the turn's been passed to Aldenwar, we see as he takes up to 4 actions, 2 of those immediately go into Mug, one of the all-stars of the Season 3 class cards. A heroic attack, it's -2/+2, doesn't deal a whole lot of damage with 4, but I gotta say, getting 2 cards from the top of your opponent's deck is a really fun way, particularly when you're facing a mirror or a pseudo-mirror in terms of archetype. Way to just keep the action flowing, as well as a good way to just generate power on the whole. It looks like the 2 cards have been pulled from Irate's deck have been Spoil, a nice card destruction piece, or some Hand Hate in the form of discard cards, or we've got a Druidic Strike, which is a really interesting one, because that means Aldenwar has functionally an additional piece of card advantage or card replacement. And filtering in his hand, which he normally would not have access to, given just the bare Ruffian Brigand Warrior setup. I believe it's Warrior. I can't recall if it's warrior or peasant. We can probably see looking through his hand. Yes, based on this challenge, I can tell it is warrior is his secondary class. So it looks like after the mug, we've got to follow up with combo. Ribcrap coming through. Ribcrap is going to go ahead and give a stun there. 3 disarms, so good against somebody else who's trying to race you in the damage front. And 2 silence. I gotta say, when I was playing against both of these opponents, Ribcrack did a ton of work against me. Disarm has always been relevant, but has been especially relevant this season, I believe, thus far. And here we see that Druidic Strike, one of the cards that was given off the mug, coming through. Aldenwar is going to go ahead and get an initiative from his upper hand after dealing enough damage to deal an attack that would leave him at a higher HP total. So he's performing the Seek action right now. It looks as though he's elected to not discard the card that was the top card of his deck, so he will not be drawing a card deeper. He's keeping that one. And the interesting thing to note here is what he might be doing with his initiative, because that's not going to keep once he passes the turn. And he's already at 7 cards in hand, so he could use it to try and get away, try to move out of melee range, but hard to really tell what he's going to be doing here. And I think he's struggling on decision himself. Of course, there is the option always that he could use it to draw and hope that he finds something better and just ends up discarding to hand size here. Let's see, he's gonna have elected to draw, and he's got, ooh, a Jawbreaker. That might be really useful next turn, but right now we don't have the actions to do it. So let's see, do we have any Throwing Daggers in the hand? We do. So instead of playing the Throwing Dagger to just use up all his resources, Aldenwar has elected to keep those resources around and instead get rid of the spoil that he pulled off of the mug. So now the entirety of Aldenwar's hand is unknown, but we do know that there's no more cards from Irate's deck presently available in there. Irate is going ahead and start with a Warrior's Banner, get a little bit of power generation there. I think one of the bigger pieces of value for this card is that it is, in fact, just heroic. Right? Heroic cards are so good in the face of like Mountains of Control, like things that Ribcrack provide. And in response, we saw that Throwing Dagger I just mentioned out of Aldenwar's hand come through, primarily because at the time that this card was that the Warrior's Banner was being played, there was no power. There were only actions available in the resource pool for Irate. So the Throwing Dagger was trying to be efficient in terms of resource exchange from the stun that it's granted from the back part of the attack, and it was managed to get an action there, which is a higher value resource than power, just in terms of how useful it is. Here we see a Druidic Lore. Oh, such a good card. Probably one of my favorite cards in Druid. We talked about the value of Regenerate being a -1/+2 in terms of resource conversion. Druidic Lore happens to share that exact same trait while also functioning as card advantage and card filtering through the Seek mechanic. So it looks as though he elected to keep the card that he found off the Seek. Instead of pitching it to the bottom and trying to draw an additional card in its place. Ooh, looks like I messed up the view there for a second. Give me a second. I'll get it back, I promise. Okay, hopefully that's back to where it was. Apologies. Okay. Aldenwar has kicked things off. Oh, I suppose upper hand does not only trigger on your turn. So that's where the second initiative is coming from for anyone who's curious. It looks as though upper hand triggered off of the Throwing Dagger, a really fun synergy capitalized on in the deck here for Aldenwar. I wonder if he's playing any of the... Yep, he is. He's playing Pommel Strike. So it looks like that's part of his game plan, is to place him in some number of instant speed attacks. Okay, it looks like Aldenwar is going to go ahead and kick off his turn after drawing with his initiative, or chasing with his initiative, to fight dirty and try to drain some more resources out of it. Upper hand's going to trigger the initiative back, and then we've got Knuckle Dust coming in. So Knuckle Dust for combo, just a phenomenal card. It ends up being almost better than a -1/+2 in certain spots, just because of the fact that you can burn through additional control for the cost. But being 2 cards and 2 power for functionally 1 net action. Just a phenomenal effect. And one of the pulls to Ruffian, in my opinion. Looks like the cards that were pulled off of that card are, I see Toothy Grin and Throwing Dagger. So another Throwing Dagger probably going to come in handy on his opponent's next turn, where he might get another trigger out of upper hand. Aldenwar has just a bevy of riches over there. I'm curious what his next move is going to be, given that he has the advantage in terms of both health total and cards in hand. Okay, looks like we're going to see a main phase or an own turn Pommel Strike. This card can be played as an instant. You can tell by the purple check mark, the purple exclamation mark there, pardon me. But it looks like Aldenwar values the disarm being stacked on his otherwise melee locked opponent. Melee range locked opponent, more than the utility of it being an instant speed card. It also tells me that we are not planning on trying to bruise this turn, but instead we're much more interested in doing something to the effect of throwing daggering on our opponent's turn. I am curious. So because, ugh, uh, yeah, so it looks like Aldenwar has gone ahead and elected to discard the Toothy Grin. One of the things he could have done there, instead of drawing with initiative, was to just play the Toothy Grin and get the luck out of the exchange, even if he was going to spend that initiative to draw a card as well. So potentially an opportunity for a small number of percentage points there from that play, but we'll see how it pays off. I mean, I know that Aldenwar is definitely in the lead, and here we see a second Warriors banner coming out from the side of Irate. Those stacking up pretty quickly, and I'm sure Irate is very appreciative of the heroic nature of those cards as to start. I know we've been seeing these 2 restorations kind of rotting in Irate's hand as he's been so down on power thus far. And his regenerate has been locked on its duration, kind of ticking down towards his ability to play it again. You might even argue that the duration ability part of Regenerate, particularly in decks like Irate's, is actually a downside. They would more than happily not attach it to themselves in order to be able to play a -1/+2 every single turn. Kind of like Arcana. That's one of the simplest ultimates that belongs to the Archmage, neither of which is being played, I think, in either of these players' decks. But the -1/+2 every turn repeatable, just so powerful in terms of resource efficiency and conversion. Let's see. Looks like there's a lot of thought going in on the side of Irate here. He doesn't have a ton of really good options at this moment. There's an argument that what he's supposed to be doing is drawing a card off this initiative, or maybe moving to the other Warriors banner and then passing the turn, just letting his Regenerate go back to the defeat zone and trying to store up for next turn. But he knows almost invariably at least one stun is coming from Fight Dirty on his next turn. And playing any more cards does open up the possibility for an instant speed attack, like a Throwing Dagger or another Pommel Strike. I guess not a Pommel Strike because there's not enough actions left on the side of Aldenwar, but something to that effect, right? So, coming down the pipeline. We'll see what he elects to do or doesn't do. One of the things about Restoration in particular is this cost here, 0-2. Should he have another Throwing Dagger, Aldenwar will be able to respond to the Restoration and guarantee get another action off of his stun, which is potentially a huge gain off of Aldenwar, given that he's already been able to stun away an action at least once this game. I haven't been keeping entirely track of what's been stunned at every single time, but at least once one of those stuns has been able to be an action, which is just so brutal. Okay, looks like we have elected to spend an action to move away. That's probably just in order to try and see if that plus this one of these restorations is able to burn through all of his disarm control right now. Let's see. So this initiative, what are we doing with this initiative? Drawing a card. Ooh, Druidic Lore is a really good card and an exceptionally tempting card to play here. Yeah, I'm not sure that if I were in Irate's spot that I would be able to avoid playing it. I think one of the things that's nice about him taking that line instead of playing Restoration, for example, is that putting the action as the cost there means that if Aldenwar was going to try and throwing dagger for a stun, the only thing he would have been able to get from a resource perspective would have been a power, which is a much less efficient use of the card. Although Aldenwar would have been able to get another initiative off of upper hand, so arguably still could have been valuable. Here we see the restoration has finally come out. That will go ahead and eat through the last piece of disarm control here, and I think that he's electing to get back an ability card. Looks like Goad. Goad. I mentioned earlier how important disarm has looked thus far in season 3, uh, and I think that stating the value of the fact that that getting back a Goad here, particularly in this matchup that's focused on punching each other from close range, both with the Ruffian specialization from Aldenwar's side and the Runic Slaughter from the Huntsman side, I think these instant speed pieces of interaction that disarm are really, really valuable and prized. I can completely understand why you'd spend a card and 2 power to get one back, especially given the fact that you still have it available to you right now. Goat only has power as a cost, and there's power available over here. Right, let's see. Ooh, Aldenwar drew one of my favorite Ruffian cards for turn, although I think it's a little bit late for it to have used its maximum utility this game. And also of note, we can see this face-down card over here on Aldenwar's board. That is Barley Chew. We are officially out of charges for Barley Chew, meaning the 3 power that came alongside it, that's gone. We're not going to have that power generation freely anymore. But we have gone ahead and played an attack. I believe it was Fight Dirty, so we'll get the stun or eating a power out of here, still leaving the goad available, and then also triggering Upper Hand. Upper Hand, I think, has looked really impressive out of this deck all tournament, and truly not just in this deck, but across a bunch of different players' decks. It's been one of the more popular traits, I think. Brigand being one of the more popular classes, and so being an easily slot include alongside that. But just having any kind of attack in the feat zone or in your ultimate means Upper Hand is live so much greater a percentage of the time. And here we see an own turn throwing dagger. Really interesting. Trying to stun away that last. I think that's actually a really, really smart play out of Aldenwar. So the stun there did not eat an action, which we talked about the importance of in previous exchanges. But what it did do was fully bankrupt the total resource pool of Irate here, which means that whatever wants to be done on the side of Aldenwar now, he's got free reign. There's nothing that can be played from the side of Irate for free. At least not at instant speed. Nobody's got gambits going on that are instant. And so I'm really intrigued as to what we're going to see out of the rest of the turn here from Aldenwar. My guess is that we're going to try to do something to build up to one of these bruises landing with combo. But exactly what, I'm not 100% sure. Okay, so we'll see a mug first, great power generation, and a little bit more card, just kind of velocity more than I think exactly selection. Okay, so what have we gone ahead and drawn? We've got a Warrior Strike and a Rune Sight, and props to the players for correctly resolving Mug versus a Second Wind, because the resolution of Mug has the cards get put into your hand as part of the resolution of the card. Then, given that these set below 20, we've gone ahead and had a Second Wind following it. So you love to see that, and just exemplary the fact that both of these players really understand the rules set of this game exceptionally well. What did we pull? Rune Sight, right? Yeah. Interesting. I wonder if Rune Sight's one of those cards where I think this is almost a dead card, I think, in the position that Aldenwar is in, unless he gets saddled with a bunch of control unexpectedly from the side of the Huntsman here on Irate's side of things. Jawbreaker with combo. So I am so intrigued as to this choice. Aldenwar here has elected not to go ahead and play a Bruise and instead go ahead and play a Jawbreaker. Basically, he's telling us that what he values more in this matchup is the greater control and not the damage, because he's so far ahead in terms of the life totals, given that he's still at 37 versus the 14 over here on the side of Irate. Irate just has not been able to dig himself out of these control holes. For lack of maybe a better term. We'll see if we come up with something better than that later on, but that's what I'm going to call it for now. These just every single turn it seems like Irate has begun and has been low or gone on resources and just been under a heavy amount of control. Uh, One of the really interesting pieces of being able to just play fight dirty every single turn and stun your opponent every single turn makes passing with resources look bad, which means interaction looks bad. So, right, so we've drawn another charge. That is probably just a card we didn't want to see from this side of things. Okay, it looks like we are going to go ahead and play that second restoration here. My guess is we're going to buy back a card. You have to wonder if he's going to get back Druidic Lore, just in terms of its ability to pay off control and the fact that it's not affected by either of the pieces that are presently on him. But I suppose he could get back another Goad. Having it both available to him, if he can find, maybe regenerate to... It looks like he's gotten back a Druidic Lore. Looks like I did call that correctly. And elected to use the slow, or to get rid of the slow off of the heroic here. Alright, so here now we have a charge, a little stunning of his own. No response, I believe, from Aldenwar. That's correct. Okay, so Aldenwar's down to 1 power is his only resource available at the time. And we're getting use initiative to draw a card. It looks like Lame. Lame is a card that is so powerful when it resolves. But I gotta say, being stuck on 2 in hand, that can really rot. At least the second one can really rot there. Although I will say the hefty damage totals attached to those cards might be exactly what is needed in order to help Irate dig a little bit out of the hole that he's presently in. Here we see Druidic Lore resolving for the 3rd, 4th time this game. Incredible card, really useful here in getting rid of that last disarm and still providing some utility. Let's see what we grab. Ooh, another Goad, this one not known about. So the first Goad, Aldenwar is almost certain to try and play around if he can. This second Goad, he can't. It's unreasonable to play around, almost assuredly. I think one of the really interesting facets of this matchup so far has been the fact that much of the talk around Season 3 has been about how good and how prevalent attach-heavy decks are. And as we see here in the finals of the Kickoff tournament, 2 of the decks that are being used here use hardly any attachments at all, and they're definitely not much of a focus. Okay, so it looks like before I missed a couple of cards here getting resolved. The previous card that was just resolved, we had a Rune Shock to try and just layer some control onto Aldenwar's side of things, and then a Rune Carve for the additional silence. Technically an attack, but didn't do any damage there. You can see he's still at 37, and he's stocked up to 2 silence here. I gotta wonder what's going on in the mind of Irate here as to how he believes his path back into the game is. Seems he's trying desperately to hold on to that action to be able to start his next turn with 4. We'll see if he's able to do so. I will say, if you're facing against a fight dirty opponent, a Ruffian, being able to stack both disarm and silence on them is exceptionally good once you're close near them, just because of the fact that fight dirty, their ultimate, is susceptible to both of those types of control. So getting out from underneath that in order to just make use of one of their traits is actually a bit of an ask. Even though we do see several heroic cards over in the hand of Aldenwar. We see, Tussle. A really good card. It just Aldenwar doesn't really have the power to make use of it right now. Okay, we've got a Druidic Strike. So I talked earlier about how that's a card that keeps just the turn going, the pace of the game going, and a Druidic Strike into another Druidic Strike probably does so even more. That's maybe one of the cards that our good friend Irate was most excited to see, if I had to pick. Okay. Wow. Lights Out, is that what they're called? Yeah. I can never remember the name of this card. It's the big, beady Ruffian card that just swings for tons of damage and has a crazy combo ability. I will say it resolves almost never, but it's maybe worth just a 1 or 2 of include because of the way that if it does resolve, it's just such a massive swing. It's no execute, I'll tell you that. Heroic for those really expensive cards is exceptionally important, but Season 3 seems to have a lot of these big swingy cards like this. Alright, let's see. What is Aldenwar going to do with this turn? He's still so far ahead. Only 14 damage to deal before getting this first game win. Lots to think about here. And only so many resources. I think one of the things that we've seen Aldenwar do so well up until this point in the game is that every time he's begun his turn, he seems to have a resource advantage. Where here we're pretty close to parity on resources, if not Irate having a little bit of an advantage on the resources right now. So that's kind of turned a little bit. I think maybe because Aldenwar was trying to push his advantage last turn. I will say it looks like every single card in his hand, except for this rune sight that I talked about being a bit difficult, and then challenge and tussle are affected by these two pieces of control. So it looks like Aldenwar has elected to play the intelligent cowards game, using both his initiative and one of his actions to move into the corner and force movement to be spent on the side of Irate if he wants to get in and make any headway on this massive life disparity between the HP totals. Okay, so we've gone ahead and drawn, it looks like a spoil, that's right, a spoil here. Spoil not looking exceptionally good in this matchup, so maybe not a card that we're excited to see from the side of, if you're rooting for Irate here. I will say, the fact that he still has a charge in his hand is exceptionally good for him here. Uh, on top of the fact that over on the side of Aldenwar, he was not able to build up a second power in order to allow him to have the max or the full resources available for tussle. Uh, Looks like we've stunned away an action again, which has happened a crazy amount in this game. And we're going to go ahead and go for a lame. One of the cards I called out earlier. One way to prevent one from rotting from your hand is to just go ahead and start playing them out there. 7 damages sure is a lot. One more of those, and we'll see a second wind out of Aldenwar's side. Looks like on top of the 2 silence that was already sitting on him, he's now got 3 slow. And here comes Regenerate back. Going to see some value out of the health regaining here. Excuse me. I accidentally hit my scroll on my mouse. And so obviously it fully messed up the board. Right. But yes, looks like that Regenerate has been played and resolved. We've gone ahead and healed, gotten the health back after 15. We'll see if he's able to get the full value out of this. Not sure that's going to happen, but he has passed the turn with his opponent no longer under any disarm, which, if attacks are what's going to kill you, disarm is what you want to be laying on your opponent. So we'll see how beneficial the slow that's been applied and the silence that was already there will be for Irate against his opponent. Another pommel strike being drawn on the side of Aldenwar, by the way. It looks like there's a Warrior's Strike hiding out in the hand of Aldenwar. Uh, just such an efficient card. And I gotta say, I'm really interested to see if that's where he starts his turn here, no longer being affected by disarm, but knowing about one goad, as we can see face up here, over on the side of Irate. You gotta wonder what kind of mind games this piece of interaction being face up is playing on his opponent. Uh, I will, while people are pondering what they're going to be doing for their turns, just go ahead and remind anybody watching that one of the interesting things about this tournament, Aldenwar is the one who was kind of hosting it, holding the whole thing. Pretty cool to see him in the finals of his own tournament as well. But there will not be a reset if the loser's final participant beats the winner's final participant. So most of the time in double elimination tournaments, if the winner's bracket player in grand finals loses a match the first time, there'll be a bracket reset, and they will perform a sudden death match. In the interest of preserving time and respecting all the players who have already been playing and watching, that will not be the case here. So, back to the action. It looks like that Warrior Strike I called out did make its way into being played, and did get met with the very same goad that we knew about as a table. So, it has been disrupted. 2 disarm has been granted over to our good friend Mr. Aldenwar here. And now we're going to see what on earth he plans to do here. So it looks like when he played the Warrior Strike, he elected to get rid of a silence. Potentially an interesting choice. You could argue that maybe the better... You could argue that the better option there for him might have been to get rid of the slow instead, just in order that he wouldn't have to spend as many resources to start running away again. Um, but hard to really tell for certain. Yeah, I gotta say, for somebody who was so ahead for so much of this game, it does look like Aldenwar is really not in that great of a spot. Uh, Goad really showing out in this particular interaction. It looks like Aldenwar is now trying to see what he can and can't play around over from this Huntsman deck. Digging through, digging. The reason I say that is because you could see the little magnifying glass. Both players have now taken a turn digging through the discard pile of Irate. I think one of the really interesting things to note about the decks that Aldenwar has elected to bring to this tournament is that he had several other options as well, but has managed to make it to the finals here today without dropping a game thus far, and that includes 2 Irate. In the third round of Swiss, in the winner's bracket, Aldenwar actually knocked Irate down into the loser's bracket 2-0, which is pretty impressive. Um, but it looks now like Irate may have learned a little bit from that match and from playing additional games with his decks. Oh, wow, it looks like we're just passing the turn from Aldenwar. He has placed his confidence in the ability that his opponent will not be able to kill him with such a meager number of actions available to them. Knowing how expensive that... oh, well, here comes that second lame I talked earlier about potentially rotting in his hand. But here's 7 more damage, 3 more slow, putting him up to max, and Aldenwar is now second winding. Let's see what cards he's got in his second wind. We see a Toothy Grin. Was that a scramble? I didn't see what he grabbed there. Uh, a Knuckle Dust. Looks like a Knuckle Dust, and I couldn't tell if it was a scramble or just an attack. Maybe a Brutal Strike. I'm going to call it a Brutal Strike. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. If you did see what it was, feel free to comment or message me if I got it wrong. Do my best to keep up with all this here. And it looks like as a follow-up to the lane, we've got that last Druidic Strike out of the deck of Irate, which has originally seen a Druidic lore off of its Seek. We'll see if that's what we're looking for from the side of Irate. Such a good card, been so good for him so far, but you've got to be asking yourself whether or not what he really wants is just attacks, attacks, attacks. And potentially, I will say, it's almost never to see Wisp form out of out of this deck. Wisp form being Heroic Travel, I mean, probably the second most appealing card in all of Druid, if you ask me, behind Druidic lore itself. But exceptionally useful against other melee range opponents here, and ones that are trying to layer control on you. I mean, just kind of good in every facet at this point. So now you can see, even though the HP disparity was so high just a short time ago, it is now tied at 15-15. And even if there's nothing else done on the side of Irate during this turn to affect health totals because of his Regenerate card, he will take the lead, which is crazy, honestly, for me to consider. Okay, seeing that his opponent is affected by 5 slows and will thus be unlikely to be able to move, Irate has elected to store up his power for a future Gambit. Maybe not the card Gambit, just, an attempt to do something. Moved away with his initiative and passed the turn to Aldenwar, who has a bevy of cards in his hand, also a bevy of control on his board. Aldenwar is really under the gun here, especially after that Runic Slaughter that got thrown in right before the turn got passed. Man, I gotta say this, one of the crazy things too is that had Aldenwar managed to have 1 more power during that last turn, would have been all the difference. Just because Tussle is present and waiting in his hand there. But only being at 1 power, it's just kind of rotting dead right now. Okay, looks like we're playing challenge. This has got to be just a heroic way to spend resources and eat through some of this control. Electing to get rid of a slow. Uh, yeah, and Irate says that's fine by me. I'm a melee range character as well. Aldenwar has been extremely reluctant thus far to spend resources raw to just take the clear action on his control in this game. I think we're seeing that that is generally such a good and powerful option to go, but has really not paid as many dividends thus far. But now that we're in melee range, Brutal Strike has gone ahead and hit. Only affected by Disarm, the only control that was not previously on our friend Aldenwar. Um, he's earned himself a power back, applied a Disarm to his opponent. We're cycling through, trying to see if there's anything we've got. At least his silence is down to only 2. So we do see there are 2 cards in Aldenwar's hand only affected by silence. So if he went ahead and spent the required resources, let's see, he could Fight with Thunder is something he can only play reactively, but Headbutt is something he play proactively. So if he ended up spending an action and a power to get rid of those 2 silences, he would be able to Headbutt, silence his opponent, layer them under some control, and then fight dirty. I gotta say that right now, with options so limited, that's probably what would be my line of thinking. But it's pretty hard to say for certain that that's the way to do it. Now, of note, that brutal strike that just went through, that was allowed to go through on the side of Irate, did stack a control that's extremely relevant here because it turns off goad. But the thing that doesn't turn off is wisp form. So should this be the action that is chosen to be taken on the side of Aldenwar, it's likely we'll see this wisp form come out, eat through this disarm, and then next turn we'll see if Irate thinks that and believes that they can go for lethal. But it's coming down to the wire here. Both players barely hanging on to double digits of health in this first game. Aldenwar thinking really hard here. You've got to assume that it's something to do with his reluctance to spend resources for the clear action. It's been a pattern we've seen all game long thus far. Um, Apologies for the long silence there. Um, I'm both trying to read all the cards in each of these players' hands, as well as considering what other options might be available to Aldenwar. It doesn't seem like he has very many, I've got to say. Being under that much slow is a huge deal, especially for Ruffian. Ruffian and Brigand, the class more associated with it. Many of their most impressive cards involve movement. Bum Rush, Scramble. As we can see, I believe both of those cards are rotting in his hand right now. There's a chance that, since this is being recorded, maybe if it gets put up on somewhere, that this part of the video gets sped up. I love watching people think through their lines of play and listening to whatever commentator is droning on as much as the next person, but perhaps someone, an editor, will be more kind to the viewer or the listener after the fact than that. Okay, looks like we've spent 2 actions on the behalf of Aldenwar. He's arrived that that is the only way to do things, is to try and resolve this headbutt. And here we see the Wisp form, just like we're talking about. That will go ahead and transport him. Ooh, the maximum distance away. That's interesting. So I think that were I irate, my small quibble with that play is that I would have gone to the next adjacent space instead of the full 2 away. Uh, since Wisp form is not a precise card. Uh, oh, he did elect to go to the space more close. Yes, just because that necessitates him spending fewer actions on movement itself next turn. So, the headbutt has been disrupted, again leaving Aldenwar short of Tussle, short of this rune sight, I want to call it? Rune sight as well. Burning through those slows, getting initiatives to be able to move would have been really, really nice too, and I think he would have been happy to do either. And Aldenwar has again passed the turn under control, discarding to hand size. You've got to wonder how many times you can do that in a game of Ivion, particularly high level like this, and be able to get away with it. Both players at 11, such a tight game. Okay, moves with initiative over from Irate. We see a big damage Warrior Strike. Really been good in this game. Turns out just dealing a lot of damage efficiently, pretty good. And here comes another Warrior Strike. And that, ladies, gentlemen, other folks, watchers, will spell the end of our first game, with the victor being Irate, not Aldenwar, dealing Aldenwar his first game loss through the tournament. Well played, Irate. Okay, the Huntsman takes it down. The Ruffian goes down. So Irate will be switching to his second deck here, following this game, with Aldenwar being able to go first, and Aldenwar will have the luxury of being able to pick whether or not he wants to keep the Ruffian deck in play or switch to his second deck for a mix-up at the same time. I believe now they're talking through the potential different lines that Aldenwar had or didn't have available to him on his last turn. You can tell by the 2 hands just kind of scrolling over his revealed hand. Oh, he had a really, really tough one. That was a hard spot to be in. Certainly one I wouldn't have been comfortable in. Well, it looks like they may have forgotten that this is not Aldenwar's card. But I did it. I went ahead and did a little assist from the judge. Not really a judge. I mean, commentary is more just like a glorified spectator. Okay, so it looks like Aldenwar has elected to swap decks for game 2. Irate doesn't have the luxury of choosing, but he does have the luxury of the first win. For Irate, that's got to feel really good. I mean, getting the opportunity at revenge for your only loss in the tournament thus far, and then at least beginning to get there, it's so nice. Okay. You know, it's been a while since I played against Aldenwar's second deck. I don't recall. Oh, so he's not changing decks. He's going to keep the Ruffian. I see. We were just reloading it to make sure that we had all the correct components. Probably good. And now, now we're seeing a Ruffian mirror. A Ruffian upper hand mirror, even better. Wow. Okay. I will say one of the most interesting things about playing Irate myself was the fact that Huntmaster and the Huntsman were both present in his deck configurations for this tournament, but not in the same deck, and I'm just not used to seeing that. So Aldenwar has elected to go first again. I'm sure that they will correct health totals here as soon as given the opportunity. Let's see if the Ruffian from Aldenwar's side of things can take things down the second time around, or whether Irate will do the reverse revenge sweep from what happened to him during the Swiss rounds in the winner's bracket. Best of luck to both players. Awesome first game. All right, Looks like we're drawing a card from Aldenwar's side of things. It doesn't look like it actually updated and went to his hand, though. There it is. It was just delayed on my screen. I will say, so we saw how good Ruffian was at stacking control on his opponent during the last game. It was in full display. And so one of the things that's going to be probably a really deciding card in this game is going to be who draws more mugs. Especially because drawing a mug and resolving a mug against an opponent, 1, ignores the control presently on you, 2, is difficult to be disrupted, and 3, is somewhat likely to take a mug out of your opponent's deck and thus reduce the number that they have access to overall, which can be really deciding in a game where as many of the crucial cards are the same in both decks. The reason I say that with such confidence for anybody who is not as well versed or not regularly participating in as many games or matches is because the only black class Ruffian is a mono black specialization. The only black class presently available to be selected for tournaments, high level play like this, because Season 0 is presently outlawed until rebalancing, is the Brigand. So these decks both share a specialization and a class. A lot of contemplation on this first turn. Elected to draw a card with our initiative here, and I think what's really interesting. So, despite having Huntmaster, Irate has elected to pass on his first turn with 3 actions, understanding that being 4 spaces away versus 3 spaces away is a huge difference in this match, because 3 spaces away against the Ruffian means an initiative spend and a bum rush. So that's for 1 resource in your initiative. They're up in melee range with you. And so despite being able to get the resource back for free from Huntmaster, he's elected not to move, which I respect a lot as a decision, particularly because of the fact that, as you can see, if you look over in his hand, 2 bum rushes are present for Irate. So he can move 4 spaces easily next turn to be right up next to Aldenwar. Aldenwar burning through his Barley Chew charges, as he is wont to do. Just glutted with actions. And we see a mug on his side as well, now. I've got to wonder if Aldenwar is playing as respectfully of Bum Rush as Irate is. He may not have to, given that Scramble is sitting there in his hand. Ah, the rarely seen offensive use of Scramble. Really interesting. So as you can see, a slow applied to himself here. But that slow's immediately burned through by the use of Fight Dirty, which will eat an action. We'll see if there's any more stuns available for Aldenwar. He does go ahead and refresh his initiative here 2 times over between Upper Hand and Toothy Grin, also gaining a luck. There's 1 initiative. What did he draw there? A Jawbreaker and a Rib Crack. Let's see. If he can resolve another attack here, Rib Crack looks really good. Let's see. Oh, I gotta say, if I'm Aldenwar here, I'm so tempted to see if I can't go Brutal Strike. We're going Pommel Strike. Okay, I'm in for Pommel Strike. Disarm is really good. And that's also going to stun away an action. That's so good. Oh, I wonder if he's still going to go for a Jawbreaker here and try to stun away the last action. He is. He is, in fact, going to go, sorry, for Ribcrack to stun away the last action, taking away all 3 and applying maximum disarm and a significant number of silence to his opponent. I think you can pretty easily say that Irate will not be fighting dirty anytime soon this game. But I mentioned earlier how important I thought Mug was going to be in this mirror match, or the pseudo mirror match, given that they're a specialization mirror but not an exact class match. Despite being affected by the full 5 disarm, Mug can burn through 4 of that. And here we see it's the first card out of his hand. He's elected to get rid of the silence instead. Probably smart. Your disarm can only go so high, so your opponent can't stack anymore on top of you. But getting rid of the silence here opens you up to some other card options. Okay, it looks like the luck got flipped. We flipped the rooster side, which means that an action had to be spent. Yeah. So, sorry about that. I was just reminding the players that technically the resource that must be spent for the rooster side of the luck token is spending a resource, and thus it would abate one of the control presently affecting Irate. So he is no longer under maximum disarm, only a mere 4, which, as we can all tell, much less, and definitely not that important of a thing. Alright, I didn't see what cards were pulled off of Mug because I was too focused on the luck token resolving. So it looks like a Pocket Sand, which, again, not going to be playing anytime soon, and a Crush. Well, unfortunately for Irate here, there's no action for him to really stun away. Aldenwar will be starting his turn with a free additional power, 3 additional power, and the only thing that we gained on the side of Irate is going to be that free action at the end of turn that comes from Huntmaster. But he is only down to 2 control affecting him presently, but he's also down to 1 resource against a deck that is notorious for stunning things away. So we shall see. But if I'm Aldenwar here, my turn has to start with Fight Dirty. I don't know what else it could be. Looks like he is of the same mind as I am on this front. Getting rid of that action and going and getting that second initiative, or the additional initiative off of upper hand. Looks like our follow-up here is Jawbreaker for 5 damage and just a bevy more disarm. I gotta say, the beginning part of this game has kind of been very reminiscent of the beginning part of last game. Sorry, forgiveness for my laughter. I was just messaged by one of my friends in the community, and also just an amazing player, Mech whose commentary was that it's amazing how good Mug is, even when it does 0 damage. And I think that's just a reflection of the fact that Aldenwar has not taken 4 damage. Thank you, Mech, for reminding me. I'm going to go ahead and message Aldenwar really quickly. It's an easy thing to miss. The important things about Mug actually are not the damage. So, I'm not surprised that it happens from time to time. There we go. Looks like Aldenwar has received my message and corrected it. I see Alden has also retreated a little bit. Okay. Alright, Irate, what you gonna do? Spend all your actions to get rid of your disarm and pass the turn back? Bold, but I don't hate it. If only there was a way for him to spend the action he's going to get back from Huntmaster here. But sadly, that is not available. So it looks like it's not just Mech Mage who thinks the deal 0 damage comment is funny after I messaged Aldenwar about correcting the game state. He said that both he and Irate were laughing about the fact that they would have played it without the damage as well. Oh, that's really funny. It seems as though the community has agreed, though. And you love to see that. Alignment in a community is so rare, particularly among uh, card games. Looks like Mug is a hit. Okay, Aldenwar's kicking things off here after moving in with his initiative with a brutal strike, because we haven't seen enough disarm yet this game. I don't think anybody here wants me to talk anymore about the fact that disarm is so good in Season 3, but my goodness, are we seeing it just be so evident right here? And we're already on the second wind for our dear friend Mr. Irate. Looks like he's taking, is that another foray, I believe? Yeah, a foray, and I did not see the second card he grabbed. Looking, it may have been a Jawbreaker. I'll tell you what, if he can get out under these disarms or these slows at any point, those cards look like they might be pretty good. One thing that's been really interesting about this game is the way that Aldenwar has been able to position himself in a place where basically invalidated the Jawbreaker, or sorry, the Huntmaster trait, which is notoriously so good. And now we see that wow, a full house over on Irate, 2 of each single kind of control. Really hard to dig back from that. Um, I believe the affectionate term in the community is a ghostly whale of control, or at least the previous version of ghostly whale, back when it only affected one player. Okay, so we've elected to get rid of the 2 disarms in order to be able to play anything this turn. And here comes a brutal strike to be met, sadly so, with 2 more disarms and be fully disrupted. But on the bright side, he will be able to have gotten rid of one of the pieces of control. I'm going to see if I can't message. So one of those slows or silences should be gone from Irate's side of the board, given that he played the Brutal Strike. Okay, so he's elected to remove a silence. I do apologize for occasionally going dark like that. I am just trying to make sure that everything is up to snuff and we're maintaining the board state. There is so much that can go on in a game of Ivion, particularly high-level Ivion. And these players have both been present throughout a whole tournament. And sometimes it helps to just have a caring eye to be alongside. Wow. I don't know when the second one got there in Aldenwar's hand, but I'm pretty sure that I just saw a third mug enter it, which is, in case you're keeping track, just so many mugs. Aldenwar has everything this game in his hand still. So here comes a mug. I wonder if... I guess he's just trying to bruise here. He believes that mug into bruise is maybe the maximum amount of damage that he can actually put his opponent under. Hard to 100% tell. Although, I think that mug just drew a mug, which is just hilarious if nothing else. Okay, so he's elected not to bruise here and instead go for the throat slash to layer yet some more control on his opponent. Interestingly, he's elected to value silence over disarm by playing throat slash. So I thought there was a bruise in his hand. Did I miss it? Well, then I stand corrected. There's no bruise in Aldenwar's hand, and I am completely losing my mind. Thank you, Mac, for keeping me in line. I appreciate that. You know, sometimes I think I just mix up the arts. You know, uh, we see that over here there is, wow, just not any hope. I do believe. Looks like just one mug will be enough to take things down on Aldenwar's turn, and we'll be heading squarely for a game 3. We will see this Ruffian deck out of Irate, see if it can't get a game off of Aldenwar's second deck, which we have not yet seen. This match, we're tied 1-1, the grand finals, no reset, kickoff tournament season 3 Ivion. Really, really phenomenal first two games. I think the first one was an education or a class in how easily a comeback can be put together if the right cards come your way and you play well and play to your outs. And the second one was a lesson in sometimes a lot of control is too much control. Okay, so here we come from. We come out of. Oh yes, this is the deck. I was wondering if I remember this correctly. So out of Aldenwar. Now we're seeing a concussive Majesty deck. A absolutely brutal combination of traits. Majesty famously attached to Enchantress, which is the specialization here. I did not see much Enchantress this tournament, and honestly, thank God, because it was really, really rough when I played against it. But Majesty stunning every single time you enter terrain for the first time during your turn, and concussive allowing you to pick which resource you stun away the first time you stun somebody on each turn. So I've spoken at length during each of the games in this match thus far about how good an exchange it is when you can stun away an action from your opponent. And that premise, the premise of how good that exchange is in terms of resources, is the premise that the deck that's being played by Aldenwar here in Game 3 is built on. So it looks like the first turn was Irate's, and his was relatively simple. Initiative to draw, action to move, refund an action with Huntmaster, and we're on to Aldenwar, who's elected to go ahead and put that piece of enchanted terrain out there next, thanks to his ultimate ability. Aldenwar's deck here, the much more controlling deck. Still capable of some really impressive damage outputs if he puts his mind to it, or if he draws some haymakers. That's not a euphemism, by the way. The literal card Haymaker is what I'm talking about. I don't know what they are debating. I think maybe that this was a card that got mugged. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm not sure what went on there. Put pocket sand from my opponents into my deck by accident. Irate saying. 30. Okay. That's what it looks like it is. Uh, yep. Okay. I see we've toiled for a watchtower. Such a powerful play, but it didn't get any immediate value and is immediately met with a foray for the double up value of destroying a card that hasn't done anything and moving closer to his opponent. I see Irate hovering over that Bum Rush in his hand. Looks like that is exactly what he's going to be doing next. To move in close, trigger upper hand, and deal the 3 damage. All right. Combo is also now enabled. We'll see if we're going to get anything good off of it. Nope. Combo is broken. We've spent it to draw a card. But he's got more attacks in store, I'm sure. Oh, wait. We're backing up. Okay. We're backing up. I suppose that he did not realize he was going to break combo, and would instead like to perform this action first before doing so. Um, you know, again, this is not like a pay-in, buy-in tournament piece. This is something that players have. This is something you should only allow your opponent to do if you agree to do so. It's generally kind and courteous if players haven't seen the cards or if information has been shared yet, or if they decide that's something they want to do before actually taking irreversible action. So Irate has elected to go ahead and play himself a Jawbreaker. Aldenwar, being a good sportsman, allowed him to do that. And we see 2 slow, 2 disarm applied, and thanks to the combo, 5 damage as well. Aldenwar is under the gun here. I wonder what we're going to see next. Irate could theoretically pass the turn, get a free action, and see what he's got, but why not press the advantage, you know? Here comes a brutal strike. Disarm, rearing its ugly head once again. Okay. Now we've also seen a kneecap. Man, I gotta say, Aldenwar's position here does not look exceptionally good. But soon he's gonna. Well, actually, you know what? I stand corrected. I don't know if any of you saw what I just saw, but what he just drew was, in fact, the haymaker I was talking about. And something I didn't notice, despite the fact that Irate has been pressing his advantage so much, is that Irate is extremely low on cards here. There's a Chaos Storm sitting in Aldenwar's hand right now that could be really brutal and is not affected by any of the types of control he's presently under. Here comes that Chaos Storm in question, removing all of the slow from Aldenwar, which is going to allow him to move over and gain access to that enchanted terrain if he so wishes. He could potentially pin his opponent under 3 pieces of attachment to the board. I talked about how thus far we had not really seen an attach heavy or focused deck out of either of these players in the finals. I got to tell you this: Aldenwar's deck here is absolutely able to contest the board by attaching things to it. Okay, Aldenwar has elected to move. Okay, and he's played a hush down as well, which will go ahead and put his opponent under some silence, making them discard a card, deal them 3 damage as well from the wild magic. Looks like the bum rush is what we've elected to get rid of over from my rate side of things. I gotta say the other 2 cards in hand definitely seem like the obvious keeps if I had to be asked one way or the other. So, I mean, that foray is going to be able to destroy the Chaos Storm and get up next to his opponent. if he can get burned through this silence at all. And then that mug not able to be disrupted very easily. So we'll see what he's going to do with his initiative here. Initiative to move, interesting choice. Electing to mug first as his way to burn through the silence. Good strategy. I like it a lot. Keeps the cards flowing. Way to get yourself out from under some control. Not guaranteed to hit anything good from his opponent, unless, of course, Watchtower. Apologies for my cough there. Uh, 2 Watchtowers is even better than 1 Watchtower, because between those two and the one that was destroyed earlier, Aldenwar is out of Watchtowers. Which, that's a not insignificant portion of the damage in his deck. Now, you see Haymaker still in his hand, and he's not affected by an like an insane amount of control. But things also aren't looking easy at this point there. From Irate's side of things, drawing into these Watchtowers makes things really interesting, because it means Foray is looking like a more attractive option, at least next turn, if not this turn. But every turn the Chaos Storm stays around, you losing cards. So it looks like we're going to start things off with a Fight Dirty, which will send Aldenwar into Second Wind land. He immediately grabs a Spellbind. And then also goes ahead and grabs a Bale. I think Bale plus Haymaker here are really just, he's decided that it's time to try and damage race a little bit. He's got some attachments on the board. He's got a little bit of contest going there. He's been trying to fight through control. I will say this, Bale plus Chaos Storm, just brutal. The other pieces of attachments as well on board are not too shabby themselves either. Irate has some important decisions here to make. I think there's a couple of different ways you could take this one. My one critique thus far of the decision making from Irate is that he's elected to tap each of his traits an opposite direction, which is eating me up on the inside. And I don't really know why he's elected to do that. But I'll message him about this afterward and see if he has any explanation for himself. Okay. He's elected to move 1 space and to drop a Watchtower beneath where he stands. I appreciate Aldenwar turning it so that it's reflecting whose Watchtower it is. I suppose that he'll be passing the turn, earning himself a free action off of Huntmaster, dealing 3 damage to Aldenwar, and sending him back with a slow to start his turn. Now, of note here, Aldenwar is 1 power spend away from being able to bail his opponent back into all 3 of his attachment pieces, which is significant, to say the least. And while doing so, he can keep up Spellbind. Not that there's any particular instant speed interaction from Irate at this point, but it enables him to play around it some, just in the fact that he could do that. Aldenwar's deck is really interesting here, in part because the pieces of damage that it is playing that are not based on attachments on the board just have really big numbers attached to them. Haymaker, Bale, we've got Ember Crash there. I don't think we've seen all that many more. I think there's maybe an Enfeeble on top here, or a Begone, pardon me. So that one's not particularly high damage card, but I don't think that's really primarily the utility of that card. And I think something that held true when Aldenwar and I played as well was the fact that these big pieces of damage were really impressive when they weren't disrupted. Looks like Aldenwar is also considering the Bale play. There's one power to get rid of a disarm. Oh, he's gone back on it. Looks like he's thinking about it still. Looks like we were fast forwarding and rewinding back and forth just a couple of times as Aldenwar does some mental math about the control and resources available to him. You can see the frantic blue hand skirting around the board from card to card. He's elected to go for, I believe this is Promise's Power? Yeah, Promise of Power, to put the onus on his opponent to choose what it is that they would like to do. Discarding 2 cards here feels insane, but allowing your opponent to draw 2 cards also feels insane. Not good choices available for Irate. Not good at all. He still has the health advantage by a significant margin, literally doubling the total that's present over on Aldenwar's side. But he's running out of resources and fast. I don't fault Irate for contemplating this decision a long time, to be honest with you. I think there were 1 or 2 spots for both Aldenwar and Irate over the course of this match thus far where I have talked about not wanting to be in their exact position. I would say that this spot for Irate is exactly one of those as well. It looks like he's elected to give his opponent resources, and wow, what a lot of damage just entered Aldenwar's hand. Goodness gracious. I think Bale is the better attack to land first here out of Aldenwar's side, but it will overcap his power. So, perhaps... Oh, what an insanely tough call. And because he elected to promise his power before going ahead and trying to resolve the Bale, he does not have access to Spellbind. I think Irate made the better choice. Now, I have way more information than anybody else involved, but I think Irate made the better choice. That's a really tough thing to call without perfect info. Even with perfect info in that spot, it would have been tough to call. But I don't think he can afford to give up the stuff that's in his hand. He's already so low. On cards... Now, of note, Aldenwar's deck is not notoriously good, this deck in particular, is not notoriously good at killing somebody from a high health total in one turn, because there's so many expensive cards in this deck. Like, he's good at meting out damage consistently for a couple of turns that will down an opponent from, say, about 27 or 30. Looks like Alden has gone ahead and opted for Haymaker as his first attempt. Understanding his opponent is still next to the Chaos Storm no matter what they do. So here comes 10 damage, 1 less action at the start of their turn. Initiative to move. Go ahead and grab that power. Will stun him away, and because of concussive, he'll elect to stun away the action, which means his opponent will only begin the turn next turn with 2 actions, and a long way to get to his opponent. Well, we see a mug. That's pretty good. And we see... Is that a knuckle dust? What is that? It's a rib crack. Rib crack is pretty good. Silence and disarm are both quite relevant against Aldenwar's deck. I don't really think there's any other option to get besides the 2 that Irate did take. If he wants to try and win this game, he's going to have to close it out. He needs to take some damage, but he needs to have cards he can actually play. I think he's debating right now as to whether or not he wants to bruise with a rib crack, because rib crack is notoriously so good, but bruise is just points on the board. He's got the watchtower, but he can't get a second watchtower down this turn. He doesn't have the wherewithal if he's going to try to go for lethal. And so even if he takes the bruise plus mug plus fight dirty, if he can find a way to do all three of those things and get over to his opponent all in the same bit, that is only 15 damage, which as you can see from Aldenwar's life total over there, he's at 17. 15 isn't going to cut it. So it'd have to be something to the effect of he can't do it this turn. Because Mug is 2 actions, there's just no way. There's just no way for him to do it this turn. And it looks like Irate has elected to keep the rib crack instead of going for the bruise. And I gotta tell you, I'm not sure that was the correct move. But again, and I cannot stress this enough, y'all, we have all the information. These players do not. Starting with only 2 actions is also just... it's awful. It's so awful. Let's see. I think that if I am Irate here, my move is to foray, blow up the Chaos Storm, and approach my opponent, and then to land a watchtower where I'm at, and I might even retreat with my initiative following. We'll see if he elects to follow the same course of action that I myself might have taken. Oops, sorry. I keep accidentally hitting the scroll button on my mouse, and it has absolutely messed me up several times. Looks like he's opted for a different course of action. He's elected to move towards his opponent and punch him with Fight Dirty, trying to eat into his resources. And now what is the question? Is he going to rib crack? I believe he is. Cutting his opponent down on power access. I will say this. Stunning your opponent who is so intent on playing -2 -2s, and -1 -2s, and things of that sort, down below 2 power is really powerful. I think one of the things that we saw that was so effective against the Ruffian match early in game 1, was that one of the reasons why Aldenwar couldn't put it away is because he couldn't get back up to 2 power, and 2 power was such an important threshold for the Ruffian deck. It's important to hit, and I can't help but wonder if that's a pattern that Irate noticed from both of Aldenwar's decks in their first time around playing and in watching Aldenwar in other matches. So maybe that's a point of stress that Irate has engaged in and tried to really hammer home when he can, is to try and keep Aldenwar's decks at 1 power or fewer. And you gotta be understanding by Irate that the fact that what is not on board right now is just is a Chaos Storm is huge, and on top of that, Aldenwar hasn't drawn another one. Not that he could play it immediately anyway. Being under all this disarm is just crushing. It's just crushing. 3 disarm is just so much disarm. One could argue that rib crack. I got there eventually. I'm sure that at least some of you listening are laughing at me stumbling over my own words. But you could argue that potentially it does 1 too many disarm. It just looked so impressive. Okay. Initiative to move, action to move, gained a power and stunned away the resource necessary. 2 silence from Hush, and Irate will begin his turn with just 3 actions and a dream. Being under the silence here is actually so frustrating. I'll tell you what, I bet you know that Irate would give his left hand for a bum rush right now. Action to move, get rid of one of those silences, and then go ahead and try and resolve a mug. We've talked before about how good Mug is. And look at that. They even remembered the damage this time. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. Now, what did we end up getting? Ooh, Ensorcel. So expensive. My guess is that we see a Lucky Coins come down here. Uh, and maybe not much else. Maybe a Fight Dirty. I don't think he's used it yet this turn, and never really hurts to have a stun. Ah, yes, I suppose he does get the initiative back from Upper Hand, which could potentially be important. Draw and see maybe if we draw a Tussle? We did not. Instead, another Loose Coins. Fight Dirty, and here we go. Loose Coins. One will definitely be coming down here. Irate has seemingly got a lot of use out of Loose Coins, kind of looping it over the course of this tournament. As a form of advantage, and it's been somewhat impressive. So here we see the Spellbind coming out from Aldenwar, Silence 1, Disarm 1, which putting 2 pieces of control on your opponent to disrupt them when they're at such low resource total is really interesting, and also preventing a successful attack is also so good against someone intent on using combo as one of the primary engines of facilitating their deck. And now what? From Irate's side of things. Spellbind, just such an incredible card out of Enchantress. The fact that that piece of disruption just so happens to be heroic too, my goodness. Okay, so we see yet another gigantic piece of damage drawn on the behalf of Aldenwar. His opponent just getting rid of the disarm with one of the pieces of power and getting the action refunded in order to enable their pocket sand as a form of interaction. A very good strategy. We'll see if it works. Aldenwar is likely to try and stun out the action here through Concussive and his Majesty ability, but we'll see if he manages to do so before taking any additional action. Of note, Aldenwar can't Haymaker or Ember Crash right now because of the silence that's present. Trying to decide where on earth to put this enchanted terrain. Thinking. You know, I don't have access to the Jeopardy music that plays while people are waiting for answers, but I gotta be honest, I think it'd apply here. This has been a really intense set of games. I don't fault either player for thinking intentionally, deliberately, and sometimes at length through the interactions here, because as we saw, we had a player dig out of a seemingly insurmountable hole in the first game, and in the second game, we had a player really strategically set up just what was almost a soft lock on their opponent for the entire duration of the game. And here, there's been some back and forth swings. You know, I think Aldenwar is in not a bad position, but he's by no means finished the game. He's down 9 health. He's barely hanging on to double digits. There's still 20 damage to do on his opponent's side of things. He's still under those 2 silence, which are nagging. He's going to have to put this enchanted terrain somewhere, though. I know. That stolen watchtower rearing its ugly head. So funny. He's elected to put it behind him. Okay, so what this tells me, I can't say for certain what it tells the rest of you, is that he is still going to go ahead and move and try to gain that power and stun away the action, but then he's going to try and Ember Crash his opponent here, and that is going to be his primary method of dealing some damage. We'll see if it holds true. I see Aldenwar hovering over that Haymaker, hovering over the Bale. Bale will be so good, and it does get rid of the silence, but it's so susceptible to that pocket sand. That's why this is tough. One thing to note about Aldenwar going for Bale, though, is if they try to disrupt it, then great. He's got two more Bales where those come from. The likelihood he's going to be able to play all three this game, plus the Ember Crash, extremely low. So if I'm Aldenwar, I think I'm just okay if they disrupt my Bale. Alternatively, we do have a second Spellbind sitting in our hand. So, I mean, it feels like a pretty easy, like a pretty easy play. And yet Aldenwar is thinking a little bit more. We'll see. Maybe he's got something in mind, or playing around something that I'm not immediately thinking of. Okay, looks like we are going for the Bale line. And looks like from the other side, we are going to go ahead and pocket sand to disarm. I'm assuming disarm. I can't read for certain, but just the fact that that would be what disrupts. Let's see what's going to happen here. Okay, it looks like Aldenwar is just okay with that happening. I do not think there's any way Aldenwar can kill from here. Well, let's see. If he uses the power to pay off the disarm and he bails, I think Aldenwar just missed lethal. Hard to tell for certain. But I think Aldenwar had an opportunity at lethal there. If he bails to move the opponent right between his two attachments, after using the power to pay off the disarm, and then he hits him with a haymaker to put him at 3, the wild magic would have dealt him lethal. But again, he does not know what additional interaction is present in the hand of his opponent. So that is tough. And I will say this too, a great call out from one of the spectators, and again, I think I mentioned Mech Mage several times on this, but he talked about the fact that if he does go for lethal, and there's a tussle present, which there was 2 power over on Irate's board before the stun happened, then that's probably game on the spot, and there's probably nothing that can be done about it, given that the tussle is a heroic piece of interaction from range 1. Now, of note, he could have gone for lethal and played around the tussle had he moved to the left, or in between his own pieces, and not had to move somebody. Okay, so it looks like over on the side of Irate, we're playing down that second stolen watchtower. Tell you what, what's better than one stolen watchtower is going to be a go ahead a second stolen watchtower. The card's better in multiples, folks. Gotta wonder what Irate wants to do here. There's no way he can get up enough resources to Ensorcel, which is his only range 2 attack in hand. I mean, he stole it off a mug, but I mean, I think that still counts, right? Getting up close, he doesn't look like he has a ton of damage available to him. He's got a throat slash, which costs power. He's got ensorcel, which costs power. He can't toothy grin or lucky coins. Um, One of the things he could do, he could make so to blow up this wild magic, stop it from doing him damage, and then earn himself a power for something in the future. I think that I'm him. I might draw a card off of this initiative and see if there's anything I can luck into that way. He elects to run away and pass the turn, getting another action from it. Honestly, just not a terrible idea. His opponent's stuck under a slow, took 3 damage from the watchtower, and I will say this, if he takes now, one of the things that's cool about that pass is that the one attack that we know is in hand for Irate, Throat Slash, if he can find a way to generate enough power in order to execute that attack on his following turn, and one of those things might be he only has to generate 1 power, because then he can make so to play it heroically. Then that will be lethal combined with the watchtower, one of the watchtowers that's presently in play and in range. So that could potentially work. Alternatively, if he can't do the watchtower, he can fight dirty in order to try and get that for lethal as well. That is a lot to ask on behalf of the power count, given he's starting from 0, but it certainly isn't impossible. And now from Aldenwar's side of things, we drew another wild magic. Not an amazing draw, but certainly not the worst thing you could have seen in the world. One of the things that's really good about board management from Irate here is that he's managed to keep his distance from Aldenwar linear, meaning that instead of trying to travel diagonally away from his opponent, where reach on some of the cards from the peasant class that is, part of Aldenwar's build become easily or are just as effective as one range orthogonally. And the fact that we are 3 ranges orthogonally away from each other means that Irate right now is not in range of any of the ranged cards from Aldenwar's deck at this time. So Aldenwar's going to have to spend something if he wants to get in to do something. And we no longer have to be afraid of Tussle because there's no power left. Okay, looks like we spent a power to get rid of the slow, we spent our initiative to go get the power. We stunned away an action with Majesty. Wouldn't be shocked if we go for an Ember Crash here. We're spending an action to move. And are we going to go for Bale? We're going for Haymaker, which sets Irate down to 3, and then we're going for Wild Magic takes it. Wild Magic takes it, and Aldenwar, after losing game 1, wins both games 2 and 3 to take down Irate. And so Irate loses his chance at winning the tournament and loses his chance at revenge in Aldenwar. But congratulations to both players and everybody else who competed for a wonderful tournament. Every opponent I managed to play was fun. Their decks were cool. I had a blast. I hope the same is true for any of you who got to participate. And for any of you who want to participate in something like this in the future, more power to you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording there. Congrats to both the players.